Hi, this is Cindy Hudson with Arbor Rehab, and I am recording our third session of the Power Up series of webinars or Zoom meetings, where we've been talking about some things related to self-care because it has been a stressful year for all of our therapists, FRCs. Everybody's had a tough one, and want to provide some information to kind of help us rethink about taking care of ourselves to get back on a good keel, even keel at least, for moving forward into better days ahead. We know that the better care we take of ourselves, the better job we can do with our families, our loved ones, our coworkers, the residents that we serve. So all the way around, I want to remind people to take good care of themselves. And we've had these series of power up sessions to kind of help reboot your system a little bit. And we talked about some general relaxation techniques. We've talked about some stress management strategies. Today we're talking about stress eating, and we know what stress eating looks like. So I'm going to try to present some information that isn't necessarily stuff that you already know, but talk about maybe some things you haven't heard before. Unfortunately, when we're stressed out, we're not necessarily inclined to eat a bag of lettuce. Maybe a bag of M&Ms, but not a bag of lettuce. Because we know that during a stressful event or time in life, for some people, stress can either increase or decrease their appetite. And for those who lose their appetite with stress, Cleveland Clinic has found that those individuals got so focused on the stressful situation, they got so stressed out on the stress that they tuned out their body's cues for hunger or thirst. And they just kind of shut down on that, and they didn't have an appetite during very difficult days. But for those of us, myself included, who tend to want to eat when we're stressed out, Cleveland Clinic found that sometimes we use food as a distraction from that stressful situation that's going on. And in addition, my system's reaction, your system's reaction to stress, the amount of stress related hormones that we release will be different from person to person. So we don't all respond even to the same stressor in the same way. And again, that's probably no surprise. But the challenging thing is that stress increases our body's release of the stress related hormone cortisol. And what cortisol does is it's going to make us crave the fatty foods, the sugary foods, the salty foods. Our nervous system says that we need that type of fuel because as our sympathetic nervous system gets triggered, that fight or flight, we're cued to then want that kind of high fat, high sugar food so that we can fight off the lions and the tigers and the bears. Because again, that sympathetic nervous system has been triggered. Last week on the relaxation session 2 of the Power Up, we talked about ways of activating the parasympathetic nervous system to help us dial it back a notch. But today we're talking about the things that dial us up a notch and how the food and physiology interact. To add to the challenge, once that cortisol has been released into our system, and so we're amped up, we're ready to fight or flight. We eat that donut for that fatty, sugary boost of energy. We eat the donut. Well, therefore, our system then we have that sugar spike, and our body is going to release yet even more cortisol to help try to balance out that blood sugar. When we got blood sugar, we want more fat and sugar, and then we want more cortisol. It just kind of keeps up a vicious cycle that goes on and on. And on top of that, Cleveland Clinic researchers found that stress, meanwhile, is also we're eating the donuts or M&Ms or whatever it is, but that stress is going to reduce our metabolism to boot. And though they didn't explain why, I do have a feeling it's a little bit like those who do a prolonged fast. When we do a severe calorie restriction to the body for a length of time, our body dials back the metabolism thinking that we're in starvation mode and we need to conserve calories, we need to conserve our energy resource because there's no more food coming. Well, in a different way, but similar, when our body then has had a, a boost of the cortisol and the sugars and those types of things, our body is thinking, okay, we've got to prepare for a long fight. We've got to slow down the metabolism to conserve the energy and calories for that prolonged fight, which is what prolonged stress really in effect does to our bodies. So again, we have that working against us. And then the final kick is that sugar, and you probably know this, but sugary and fatty foods are addictive. They have the stuff in it that we tend to start to crave once we've had it. And so those addictive properties keep us going, keep the blood sugar spikes, keep the cortisol, and it goes into a vicious cycle. So all I can say is good luck because it's tough. It's tough, especially when we're under chronic stress. And you probably also know that under chronic stress, the body then never really gets a chance to reset, get back to baseline. It just becomes a permanent thing. The lions and the tigers, that fight or flight response never completely turns off or shuts down. And so we have a constant low level volume of cortisol and adrenaline floating around in our systems, which can make us anxious and irritable and generally kind of cranky and not so fun to be around. Even though it's chronic stress, it's low level. We do have the physiology going on that's going to make us a little bit more difficult to be around. So we go for the donuts, and in fact, they found that there was a little bit of a reason for us going for the donuts. It is a little bit of a healthy response in a basic sense, because the fat and the sugar that we put into our system with that donut or ice cream or whatever it could be is going to result in suppressed stress-related responses and stress-related hormone responses, stress-related emotion responses. It's going to dial it all back a little bit. So comfort foods really do just that. Physiologically, they do comfort us, but it's a temporary comfort. And when we're under prolonged stress, we want more than just temporary, right? And then we know what that does. When we want donuts every day and ice cream and all that stuff, it tends to amp up and become a problem. Whereas if we had it once in a while, it wouldn't be necessarily so problematic. It would comfort us during a temporary stressful situation. Harvard, another kick in the pants is that Harvard researchers found that under stressful situations, women tend to turn towards food for that comfort when stressed, whereas men tend to turn towards alcohol and smoking when they're stressed out. So guess who's going to gain more weight during stressful times? That's us ladies, because we're going for the food, our metabolism's slowing down. Physiologically, we're getting hooked into it because of the addictive properties, because of the blood sugar levels, the cortisol levels, all kind of working against us. So you probably already know some of the foods that would be good to avoid, just in general, because they're going to increase our stress responses. But just as a quick overview, red dye number 40 has been found to increase irritability. MSG increases our anger and irritability. So a lot of times you go to Oriental restaurants, you can ask to not get the MSG in the food. It's an additive that certainly the food tastes fine without it. We don't need it to trigger more irritability and anger. And actually, alcohol disrupts our sleep cycles. So even though initially people may, crash with alcohol, it's actually going to reduce the amount of quality REM sleep that we get. It's been found to actually increase levels of anxiety hormones in our system. It increases our blood pressure, our heart rate, you know that. So those things also don't contribute to good restful sleep. And again, more disruptive, not only at sleep, but for our whole physiology. We know caffeine is not necessarily, it's kind of good in one extent, but too much increases anxiety, nervousness, that type of thing. So we don't need that when we're under a high stress situation. Aspartame, which is an artificial sweetener, has been found to increase anxiety. And the artificial sweeteners of all sorts have another downside because they tend to increase our sugar addiction because our taste buds get retrained to want more and more of that sweetness. It's kind of almost like a drug tolerance thing that we get used to this level of sweet, and then we can add more artificial sweetener because we think, hey, it's 0 calories, and we get used to this level of sweet and more and more and more. So almost in a sense like a drug tolerance, we need more of the good stuff to enjoy it. Not necessarily a good thing. Processed and refined carbohydrates are going to also have been linked to increased moodiness, increased irritability. So again, some of the all those processed crackers and cookies and all the good stuff that we enjoy isn't really helping us when we're dealing with high stress situations or prolonged stress. So on the other side of the coin, the now what, some things that can empower, some foods that can empower our systems during times of stress, which would be oatmeal. I never knew this, but actually oatmeal increases the level of serotonin that's released in our brain. And serotonin is one of those feel-good neurochemicals. So serotonin is a good thing. Eating oatmeal is a good thing unless we amp it up with too much sugar and fat. But oatmeal in of itself is a good thing because it has the serotonin to help our brain calm down a little bit. The complex carbohydrates can be good for us. The things like the whole grain bread, whole grain pastas, sweet potatoes, those kinds of things. Those carbs are going to tell the brain, the complex carbohydrates tell the brain to make serotonin. The complex carbohydrates, because it's going to help our systems to have a little bit more of an even keel blood sugar level. And it's also going to help our brains to release the serotonin on a more even keel, time released sense, not getting the spike and then the drop, but a steady release of serotonin, steady blood sugar levels are going to help us have more stable moods, more stable energy levels throughout the day and help us handle the stressful times. Vitamin C, which we can find in oranges and strawberries and that kind of good stuff. Vitamin C curbs the release of stress hormones. That helps curb the release of cortisol and adrenaline in our systems. So amp up on those good things. The soybeans, salmon, green leafy vegetables, all those are high in magnesium, and the magnesium has been found to help us reduce our stress responses. One of the things that low magnesium does in our systems is it increases our tendency toward fatigue, towards headache. And when you're tired and headachy, you're more likely to be irritable. You're not able to be your best self because you've got this headache. So that's going to increase your feeling of stress and anxiety. The other food or the other nutritional aspect that's been found to help during stressful times would be omega-3s. So that can be found in things like tuna and salmon, and that's going to help our bodies to modulate the stress hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline, as well as help to reduce those feelings of anxiety because it's giving us a feel-good neurochemical in our system. So the fatty food cravings that we have when we're wanting the cookies, the M&Ms, the Ben & Jerry's ice cream, whatever it might be, consider trying to satisfy those fatty food cravings with maybe a healthier substitution. Foods like nuts, in particular, like almonds, walnuts, pistachios, avocados, those are high fat foods, but they also have some good for you antioxidant properties. They have the omega-3s in them. They have the healthy fats that we need. So maybe considering some substitutions can help us get through stressful times without going crazy. Because right now, I think trying to deprive yourself of something that you really enjoy when you're stressed out, that's almost adding to the stress. So consider substitutions that might be a little bit less damaging to your system. Crunchy foods, we know, like crunching through rice cakes or carrots or whatever, can kind of sometimes be an outlet for that anxiety as well, help us cope with stress. When you think about athletes, think about how they eat. They don't eat donuts every day when they're preparing for a big event. They eat the complex carbohydrates. They eat the saturated fats, the healthy fats. They're looking to give their body the best fuel that they can so they can perform at their peak level when it's time for that big event. So if we think about we're going through a marathon, at least a half a marathon every day in terms of what you're dealing with in terms of stress, the physical challenges of your jobs, everything that you might be dealing with at home. So helping your body be at peak performance levels for your everyday marathon events, maybe it's a good thing to consider eating more like an athlete. And just like an athlete, before a big event, they may carb out. They're going to have the donuts and the bagels and all that kind of stuff to give their system a boost, get them through that big event. Okay, fine. You can do that too in moderation. So leaving you with that thought, knowing your triggers, being prepared, maybe having something in your stash drawer. Most therapy departments have a little drawer stash of whatever it is, but consider maybe, bags of pistachios or healthier options for you than what your go-to might be currently. Some of the other suggestions that came up during our live Zoom session was that to be aware that if you eat dinner late, which sometimes is hard to not do, especially as we start to have summer events coming on and you're running around kids to different practices and that type of thing. So you don't have a chance to eat dinner till 8 o'clock. Well, A, you're starving. So B, you're going to go for something quick and easy. C, it's probably not going to be the healthiest options you can have. So trying to plan ahead for those late night dinners, what's quick and easy that's going to be healthier. And also the other idea that came up is that being aware, if you shop the perimeter of the grocery store first, that's where all the healthy stuff is. You've got the dairy, you've got the meat, you've got the produce all around the perimeter of the store. And the aisleways, the center of the store, where we may tend to hang out, is where they've got the Doritos and the Oreos and all the stuff that's not necessarily as healthy as the fresh produce, meat, and dairy products. So think about shopping the perimeter first. We all know not to shop hungry because then everything looks good, both the healthy and the unhealthy. So I leave those with your thoughts, leave those thoughts with you, and hope that you're taking good care of yourself as we move forward into better days ahead. Today is April 1st. We're having a blizzard, Mother Nature's April Fool's joke, but we know spring is truly coming. Things are rounding the bend. Please take good care of yourselves. Thanks for your time. Bye.